Welcome. On behalf of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, we welcome you to the University of Wisconsin-Marathon County for tonight's forum, Challenges of the New American Immigration. My name is Eric Giordano, and I'm an assistant professor of political science here at UW-Marathon County and the director of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service. This forum was made possible by generous support from the Wisconsin Humanities Council and from the UW-Marathon County. Tonight's forum would also not be possible without the hard work of our program associate, Jean Greenwood, University Public Relations Director, Judy Witkoff, our theater technicians, Chris Berg, David Dickinson, and Nate Freeberg, our UWMC ambassadors, and we'd also like to thank Dean Sandra Smith for her support for the ongoing Journeys to American Identities programming. And lastly, we thank you, the audience, for taking the time to come out on this glorious spring evening for a night of education and learning. The panel presentation will be followed by an audience question and answer session. You'll be free to ask questions directed at one or all of our panelists. UWMC ambassadors will circulate through the theater with microphones. We'd ask that you ask one question per person, and also that you accord our guests and each other the courtesy and respect that we all expect from a public forum dedicated to civil dialogue. At the conclusion of the panel, you will be asked to turn in evaluation sheets. We like to have you fill those out because we hope to learn your opinions about our programming so that we can improve for the future. At this time, we'd like you to make sure that your cell phones and pagers are turned off. Our forum will end promptly at 9 o'clock. And after the forum, we'll have a short reception in the terrace room, which is immediately to the right of the theater as you exit. This is the last in our series of programming this year on Journeys to American Identities. It's been a magnificent year. We've enjoyed sharing this programming with you, and we hope that you'll enjoy this evening's program. To some concerned citizens, the question about immigration, the issue of immigration, has been labeled a war, with the front line being the U.S.-Mexican border, where approximately 300,000 illegal immigrants have been arriving each year for the last several years. Metaphors aside, they argue and claim that this war is sapping our economic well-being by providing a landing spot for immigrants who drain American tax dollars every time their children attend U.S. schools. They go to the emergency room for treatment and partake of other benefits associated with living in America, but without paying for those benefits. Opponents of this view might suggest that workers are here because of economic incentives and that they, in fact, do provide an important economic benefit to the American economy, namely cheap labor for jobs that most Americans are unwilling to accept. In addition, many do pay taxes on their income and therefore do contribute something tangible besides their labor. Last year, immigrant rights groups applauded a federal judge in San Francisco who temporarily prevented the Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration from using mismatched Social Security data to penalize employers who hire illegal aliens. According to this view, immigrant laborers give their sweat and labor and live a version of the American dream, except for one small fact, and that is that they're denied the ability to become American citizens, and that they are somehow unfairly penalized because of this inability to become American citizens. In a series of public dialogues held this spring throughout Marathon County in partnership with the Marathon County Public Library, we learned that the issue of immigration is absolutely complex. Although not everyone who came to the dialogues agreed on what to do about it, we certainly, most of us anyway, agreed that the immigration system in America is broken. So, do we build a wall to keep out illegal immigrants? Do we create a guest worker program and a pathway to citizenship for our southern neighbors who want to become American? Do we penalize businesses who hire illegal immigrants? Do we need to beef up government inspection of businesses and employers and their practices? Or do we have a more lenient policy that lets economic interests dictate our policies? For answers to these and other questions, we will turn to our panelists tonight. We have a wonderful panel. I'm very happy to present each of them. We'll first hear from Michelle Waslin, a PhD and Senior Research Analyst at the Immigration Policy Center, which is a division of the American Immigration Law Foundation located in Washington, D.C., dedicated to providing factual information about immigration and immigrants in America. Michelle has authored several publications on immigration policy and post-9/11 immigration issues, and she appears regularly in English and Spanish language media. She previously worked as Director of Immigration Policy Research at the National Council of La Raza and Policy Coordinator at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. Originally from Wisconsin, she received her PhD in 2002 in Government and International Studies from the University of Notre Dame. Our next panelist is Jessica Vaughan, a Senior Policy Analyst for the Center for Immigration Studies, a Washington, D.C.-based research institute that examines the impact of immigration on American society and educates policymakers and opinion leaders on the need for more robust immigration law enforcement. She has been with the center since 1992, and her area of expertise is immigration policy and operations, covering topics such as visa programs, immigration benefits, and immigration law enforcement. She is currently the lead investigator for a Department of Justice-funded project studying the use of immigration law enforcement in transnational gang suppression efforts. Prior to joining the center, Mrs. Vaughan was a Foreign Service Officer with the State Department, where she served in consular and administrative assignments in U.S. embassies overseas. Her articles have appeared in the Washington Post, The Economist, The National Interest, and she has frequently appeared on NPR, CNN, and PBS's NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Our next panelist is Dale Heisey. I want to make sure I've got the right thing here. Dale is the president and owner of Marathon Feed Incorporated, a full-service family-owned feed mill in Marathon in operation for over 25 years. Dale has been in the agricultural business for over 50 years, growing up on a family farm, and has worked in various jobs in agribusiness before he took ownership of Marathon Feed. He has managed his business's responsibilities successfully and has helped grow each of his companies he has worked at or owned. His family remain active participants in their community. Dale is a volunteer at various communities-based programs and boards in the business and nonprofit sector. Along with Marathon Feed, Dale's family owns and operates Custom Meats of Marathon, a custom butcher shop, and Marathon Town and Country, a retail feed store in Wausau, and Agri-Service Center of Athens, another feed mill in Athens. Bob Dinkle has spent 25 years in the agricultural business, including 20 years at his current position as CEO and General Manager of Customer One Cooperative, where they enjoy $30 million in sales in feed, agronomy, petroleum, Napa, and convenience stores. These are located in Merrill, Edgar, Marathon, employ 90 workers, and run and maintain a very successful enterprise. We're very happy to have both of these gentlemen here. And I just want to say up front that Bob, in particular, has taken time out of his evening. He's got an important board meeting that he's going to be missing a part of, and we're going to be excusing him at 8:30. So we thank you, Bob, and hope you'll understand that if he leaves, it's not just because he's upset with the programming. Finally, we have two very special guests that I'm very happy to welcome here. Our first is Jaime Pacheco. He is living in the United States with his wife and teen daughter, and they have their own small cleaning business. Jaime has recently joined the Comunidad Hispania Board in Merrill and was elected as its president, and has since been very involved in this organization's activities. We have another panelist who has asked that her name not be revealed. She is here tonight to share some of her views, and we're extremely happy to have her as well. And to help translate for her in particular, we're also pleased to welcome Professor of Spanish, Nancy Hesser, here from UW Marathon County. Without further ado, we'd like to turn the time over to Michelle Waslin.
Thank you, Eric. First of all, I just would like to say how honored I am to be invited to be part of this event. As Eric said, I am originally from Wisconsin. I grew up in Sheboygan North High School, class of '86. Our boys won the state basketball tournament my senior year, so I'm a very proud Wisconsinite. The last time I was here in Wausau was actually many years ago. I was a little kid, and my whole family came here because my dad's statewide bowling tournament was held in Wausau. So it's been a very long time since I've been here, and it's about time that I came back, and I'm very honored to be here with you tonight. You're going to hear a lot of different views on this excellent panel that's been assembled tonight. And I think that there's one thing that we can all agree with, and that is that our current immigration system is badly broken and in desperate need of repair. And I also want to be on record saying right off the bat that I oppose illegal immigration. I think that illegal immigration is bad for the United States. I think it's bad for undocumented immigrants, definitely. I think it's bad for U.S. workers. It's bad for the economy. And it's only really good for those people that profit from illegal immigration. Smugglers, traffickers, unscrupulous employers who hire undocumented immigrants and can avoid labor laws and wage and hour laws to exploit them. It's good for people who manufacture and sell fraudulent documents, for example. But overall, I do oppose illegal immigration. And I strongly believe in the rule of law. I think that our current system actually encourages more illegality. It encourages employers, to hire people off the books because there are no ways of bringing legal workers to this country in many cases. It encourages smugglers to charge really high prices to people who want to cross the border, who want to risk their lives and cross the border to come here for a better life. It also creates a system where immigrants are very vulnerable and fearful of reporting crimes to the police, for example. So they're easy prey for criminals who take advantage of them. It encourages illegality. Let me give you another example in the legal immigration system. There are currently many thousands, if not millions, of people who are in the United States who have been approved for family-based visas. They're living here, either they crossed the border illegally or they entered on a temporary visa and overstayed that visa, but they have an immediate family member who was able to petition for them for a visa. And they've been approved for that visa, and their visa number has come up. But in order to get that visa, they need to leave the country to process at a U.S. consulate. And what happens under the current law is if you leave the country, they will be barred from re-entering the country for 3 or 10 years and sometimes even permanently. So the law actually encourages people to remain here illegally rather than get that visa that they are eligible for. A lot of people talk about the rule of law. What about the rule of law? Well, first of all, I think that these current laws are broken, as I've said. I think that people who talk a lot about the rule of law are supporting enforcement of laws, are supporting new laws that prevent immigrants from obtaining housing, from obtaining identification, police protection, and other basic services. And again, I think that this just foments this lack of lawfulness in the country. I think it encourages illegality. And I think people invoke the rule of law to oppose reforms that would create a good set of immigration laws in this country. And again, the more that we suffer under this system of broken laws, the more it encourages even more illegality. I think that we do need a new immigration system that honors the rule of law. But under this system, Our system would protect those fleeing from persecution and violence. It would encourage immigrants to cooperate with the police. It would expedite family reunification, and it would serve the need of both high-end and less skilled workers. It would provide millions of hard-working immigrants with a path to legal status here in the United States. And in the past few years, there has been a real movement towards immigration reform. In the past couple of years, I have had the pleasure and the honor to work with other advocates from business, labor, religious organizations, ethnic organization, and others who have come together in unprecedented ways to fight for immigration reform. And we've come really, really close. But unfortunately, there is a small but very passionate and very vocal group of people who are opposed to anything that remotely resembles practical and useful reform. And their message has been no. Whatever comes up in Congress, no. And it has resulted in no real reforms, no real solutions, and only more enforcement of the same broken laws and more of the same failed policies of the past 2 decades. I firmly believe that we are reasonable people, and that reasonable people want fair, rational, practical immigration reform. And poll after poll supports this. It shows that the majority of Americans want to see real immigration reform that includes tough enforcement measures, but that also includes a process to require undocumented immigrants to come forward and pay their taxes and legalize their status. I think reasonable Americans recognize that we simply cannot round up and deport 12 million people. That would be financially impossible, and it would have a huge impact because those 12 million people are married to legal immigrants and citizens. They have citizen children. It would be impossible to tear apart those communities. I think reasonable people also recognize that no matter how miserable we make their lives, people are not simply going to choose to return to their home country. Only a serious and thoughtful approach to resolving the problems underlying our current immigration system will be satisfactory. But unfortunately, again, that has been real difficult in the current climate. This isn't just about legislation. It's not just about passing a new law and policy solutions. I think that's what we thought in Washington, D.C. over the last couple of years when we were studying this and trying to design practical policies that would really resolve the issue. But it turns out that not everybody is having a rational policy conversation about what would work best for immigrants and what would work best for Americans. Across America, people are having a discussion about our values, about our identity, about our culture. And that's an important conversation to have. But unfortunately, I have seen that this conversation has gotten really ugly over the past couple of months and years. And I've really experienced this directly, receiving a lot of hate mail, and my colleagues have received a lot of threats for pushing comprehensive immigration reform. And I really do think that those people who vehemently hate immigrants, who really think that brown people are destroying this entire country and our language and our culture, I think that that is a very small minority of people. But unfortunately, extremist language is becoming much more mainstream. We're seeing extremist language all over the place. And the fact is that ugly language, stereotypes, misinformation, and demagoguery has become very common. And we hear it every day on cable news shows, on talk radio, and online. If you read a story online about immigration, and then if you go all the way down to the bottom and read the comments, they're really ugly. And I think that these are the type of language that wouldn't have been seen there a couple of years ago. I see an environment where It's okay to proudly talk about how anti-immigrant you are or how anti-Latino you are, and to lump together undocumented immigrants, legal immigrants, U.S. citizen Latinos all together and talk about how they are destroying America, how they are destroying this country. I think that this debate that we're in the midst of right now is really an important debate about who we are as a nation and how we're going to move forward in the 21st century. For generations, America has been built by immigrants, some who came legally, others who didn't come legally, depending on what the laws were at the time. And these were immigrants who valued hard work, perseverance, faith, family, and a commitment to the American dream, the American ideal. Are we going to continue to be that country? Or are we going to continue down this nasty path? Are we going to continue to pass these deportation-only type policies, which are really spreading fear throughout our communities? Are we going to continue to hold big raids in factories and other work sites? Are we going to continue to go door to door, knocking on doors, entering, searching for immigrants? Are we going to continue to deny basic health care to legal immigrants, which is what the case is right now? We need to decide if we are a country of walls, raids, racial profiling, separating parents from their children, intolerance, divisiveness, or are we still that same nation of immigrants, of second chances, rewarding hard work? I'm really concerned about what I see happening around the country. I see an increase in hate crimes, especially against Latinos. I see an increase in the number of hate groups forming around the country, many of these anti-immigrant groups. Just the other day, there was a demonstration right on the Mall in downtown DC by the National Socialist Movement. This is a group of neo-Nazis, and they had a demonstration on the Mall to protest, quote, the illegal invasion of America. This is a group that believes that, again, quote, only heterosexual, pure-blood whites should be allowed citizenship. All others should be stripped of their constitutional rights. And they further call on the U.S. to ban all non-white immigration and to publicly execute Black, Hispanic, and Jewish criminals. Now, again, this is an incredibly extreme group. I know that this is a tiny minority of the population, but I am seeing this type of activity, this type of rhetoric over and over again. And again, we need to ask ourselves, is this the kind of country we want to be? Is this the kind of country where we want to try to make the lives of people so miserable that they will hopefully choose to leave and go back to their country, which was probably a pretty bad situation to start with, seeing as they risk their lives to come here and live in the United States. What does that say? What does this policy of attrition say about the rule of law? But more importantly, what does that say about us as a country? I think we really need to recognize and marginalize those that preach this message of hate. There's a Latino anti-immigrant group that is called the You Don't Speak for Me Coalition. This is a group that was created and is supported by the Federation for American Immigration Reform, a group that was recently labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, but it's called the You Don't Speak for Me group. Now, while I disagree with their ideas, I think that that's a really important phrase, and I think that we should take back that phrase, and we should make it clear that these extremists do not speak for me. They don't represent the best of America. We need to get beyond the name-calling and the finger-pointing and the scapegoating, and we need to focus on creating an immigration system for the 21st century that ends illegal immigration as we know it, that serves the needs of our economy and our families, and that adheres to our traditional American values. Now, of course, I have some specific ideas for how we go about doing that, but I will leave that for the question and answer period and end my remarks here. Thank you.
Good evening. I can't imagine when Eric set up this panel that he could have dreamed that by inviting two people from Washington organizations to speak, he would have found two people with connections to Wisconsin. But I was so delighted when I got the invitation to come and speak because my great-grandfather, Jacob Fisher, immigrated from Vienna to Milwaukee and raised his family, which later included my grandmother and my mother in the Milwaukee area. And I spent all day yesterday with my family in the Milwaukee area talking about all kinds of things, including family. In fact, he was a stonemason, and he did a lot of the masonry work in your state capitol building in Madison, and also a lot of the work on some of the buildings in downtown Milwaukee. And we still have a lot of family there, so I'm just thrilled to be here. The theme of my remarks tonight is going to be that while I do certainly endorse the concept of immigration and really do appreciate the importance of immigration and the role it's played in building our nation, I do agree with Michelle that now is the time for some important reforms to be made to immigration policy because we need to, for one thing, the immigration that we're currently experiencing today is having some adverse effects on some of the most vulnerable people in our society, which include recent immigrants themselves and also African Americans and young people and people who are on the margins of society and are struggling themselves in this economy to lift themselves up and to be able to support their families. And in a nutshell, our research has shown that immigration levels that we have now are too high and that the system needs to be reoriented so that those we do admit stand a better chance of being able to succeed here. So I'm going to cover the nature of immigration today, and I'm going to talk about some of the economic and social and security effects of our immigration policy, and then talk about some of the ways that I think we could improve our policy, and if we get to it, maybe talk a little bit about the prospects for immigration reform nationally. We've been experiencing record levels of immigration in recent years. We now have 38 million immigrants in America, and that's the highest level in 80 years. And in fact, right now, about 1 in 8 Americans is an immigrant. And that's, in Wisconsin, that's a little bit less of a proportion of the total population. The number of immigrants in Wisconsin is about 260,000 now. And so that's less than 5% of the population. So it's about half the rate nationally. In the last 10 years, 100,000 immigrants have arrived in Wisconsin. Most of the growth actually occurred from 1995 to 2000, which I found to be very interesting. That's different than the pattern in a lot of other states around the country who have experienced recent growth. So for whatever reason, Wisconsin had a big surge in the late 90s. Nationally, since the year 2000, more than 10 million immigrants have arrived in the United States, and that's the highest 7-year period of immigration that we've ever experienced in our history in absolute numbers. The other interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize is that half of the arrivals since 2000 are actually illegal aliens. In Wisconsin, it's the Pew Hispanic Center estimates that there are about 75,000 illegal aliens living here, out of a national population estimated to be about 12 million. And legal immigration in 2007 is over 1 million people a year. So we're adding the equivalent of a major metropolitan area each year to our country just in legal immigration. And there are another 6 to 7 million people on a waiting list who have already been deemed eligible to immigrate to the United States, but who are going to have to wait as long as 20 years to be able to apply and receive their green card. So this simply is an unprecedented situation in American history. And a lot of the challenges that our immigration policy today poses are a result of the way our immigration system is structured, with we admit unlimited numbers of family members of U.S. citizens, close family members, and a smaller amount of numerically limited categories of immigrants, the largest share of which are also family members. We really take a very small percentage of our annual inflow of immigration is people who are coming here because they have a job offer or because they have skills that we're interested in having contribute to our economy. We also take another 50,000 people a year in a lottery program. And of course, we have a long tradition of accepting humanitarian immigrants, both refugees and asylees. So it's a system that is set up to give priority to family members so that the largest number of immigrants every year will be here because they're related to somebody who has come before them. Our immigration flow, while we're getting immigrants from all over the world, it's kind of superficially diverse, I would say. In fact, half of all immigrants in recent years have been from Latin America and about a third from Mexico. Less than a fourth from Asia, and about 13% now from Europe, and a small share, 6%, from the Middle East and Africa. So we have a very large share of immigrants who are Spanish-speaking, and that's an interesting difference from the last great period of immigration around the 20th century, which was much more linguistically diverse. When we look at we spend a lot of time looking at Census Bureau data to see what that tells us about the immigrant flow and the immigrant population in the United States. And what we found is that the educational attainment, the educational levels that immigrants today have really does reflect the fact that very few people are admitted on the basis of skills that they have to bring. Of all the adult immigrants in America today, about almost a third lack a high school education, compared with about 8% of natives who are in that category, while the number who are college graduates is about the same percentage of Americans who are college graduates. So it's a little bit much more skewed toward immigrants who have not received much education. And as a result, the income levels of immigrants in America tend to be much lower, and households tend to be much more dependent on social services than do natives. In fact, about a third, almost exactly a third of all immigrant-headed households are using at least one major welfare program, compared with less than a fifth of native households that are dependent on welfare. And about a third also lack health insurance. And in fact, immigration, we've figured out, is responsible for almost all of the growth in the uninsured population in America today. And while immigrants do make progress over time, even after most immigrants have been here about 20 years, they're still much more likely than natives to be living in poverty. And obviously that's not because immigrants are not hardworking or because they lack legal status or that there's something else wrong with immigrants. It's simply because most of them happen to be less educated than Americans and thus more challenged in terms of being able to find jobs and so on that would be well-paying. So unless you would deliberately want to increase the number of people living in poverty in the United States, it's hard to describe our immigration policy today as a successful public policy. I think we'd all have to agree that you wouldn't want to deliberately import poverty. At least I can't think of a good reason to do that. And like all forms of public policy, there are winners and losers to our immigration policy. And the winners tend to be immigrants themselves who are able to improve their quality of life by coming here, and also their employers, usually because they are able to attract workers who are willing to accept lower salaries than they might be able to find in the native population. But it's also clear from the census data that the biggest losers in our immigration scheme today are the significant number of people in America who already are challenged economically because they too lack an education. And we have currently about 4 million people who lack a high school education among the native-born population who are unemployed or looking for work in the United States. That doesn't even count the people who have given up looking for work entirely. And so that's why it's impossible to find an economist in America today who agrees that we are lacking unskilled workers in our economy, or that our economy somehow needs unskilled workers, because we have an oversupply of people in that category already in the United States. And so what happens is when we have mass immigration of people who are competing with unskilled native workers, not only does it diminish opportunities for those workers that we would like to be able to move into the workforce because they're competing for the same kinds of jobs, but also wages stay stagnant for years. And we've seen this happen in industries like construction and farming and landscaping and certain other occupations. Wages have either stayed completely stagnant or they've declined over time, and which obviously shouldn't be a public policy goal, and we shouldn't perpetuate policies that have that kind of an economic effect, where you're making poor people poorer, essentially. There's a well-known economist from Harvard University named George Borjas, who studied the last 20 years of immigration and found that American wages have actually declined almost 4% directly as a result of immigration. And the effect was almost double that for certain groups of people, blacks, recent immigrants, and young people in particular. And this in itself, a system that perpetuates declines in wages at the low end of the scale, is also costly from a fiscal standpoint, just in purely practical terms. Because immigrants tend to earn less money, they pay less in taxes, and they are more dependent on social services. So it simply works out, as the National Research Council has found, that there is a net fiscal cost to the immigration policy that we have been pursuing, to the tune of anywhere between $11 and $22 billion a year. And that's a net effect, where you actually account for all the tax payments that some immigrants do make, and subtract the amount of services that they use, and you come out with a net fiscal drain of well over $10 billion a year. And while most of the taxes that immigrants pay go to the federal government, most of the costs that have to do with education, healthcare, criminal justice, and housing and social services are borne by state government. So it's a very inequitable situation as we have it now. And I'll just comment quickly also on some of the security implications of our failure to control our immigration policy. Because of the scale of immigration today, we have our government agencies that manage immigration that are attempting to manage immigration, I should say, are just completely overwhelmed with the numbers, and all of the agencies are completely understaffed. And that creates a situation where it becomes easy for groups that want to exploit our immigration system to do so, because we simply don't have the systems in place that would enable us to adequately screen applications or visitors or any other person that we would give entry to. And so we've made ourselves a bit more vulnerable as a result, either to terrorism, which obviously is going to be a very rare situation, but also to organized crime, transnational gangs, drug traffickers, and so on. And while I don't believe that immigrants are any more likely to commit crime than any other demographic group in America, there are certain types of crime that have a nexus to the borders. And so there are certain types of crimes in which illegal immigrants in particular are disproportionately involved, and some of those do represent significant public safety problems. So we need to have robust immigration law enforcement systems in place to deal with those, whether it's MS-13 or I think it's Brown Pride is one of the big gangs of transnational gangs in Wisconsin, or Mexican Posse, I think, is another one, or drug trafficking. We need to have systems in place that would enable us to prioritize removals of criminals, and that's just a basic public safety issue. So what do we do about immigration policy? How do we reform it in a way that serves our national interest and preserves our wonderful tradition of immigration, and that avoids the adverse economic effects or the cost to certain populations? And I would mention about four big steps, guiding principles that we should consider. And the first would be to reduce legal immigration to more traditional levels that will have less of an impact on vulnerable populations. At this point, we simply need, because of the demand and the waiting list, we simply need to cut out certain categories that are less of a priority than others, and focus our admissions on immediate family members of both citizens and green card holders, and say, that certain categories are just not possible to admit nowadays. And I'm thinking in particular the category of brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens. Another guiding principle ought to be that we need to admit more people, or increase the proportion of admissions of people who are likely to succeed here, that have skills that our economy needs and wants. Thirdly, we need to slash illegal immigration. And fourthly, give more attention to Americanization and to providing a warmer welcome for the immigrants that we do admit, and provide more resources to programs that will support their integration into American society, whether it be languages or education or job training or what have you, so that we are able to ensure the success of immigrants and make it possible for them to contribute to American society, to fulfill their potential here. And how to do that, again, I talked about eliminating categories. I think the visa lottery program can go. I don't see that there's any real constituency for that program, or that it serves any real purpose, when those numbers could go to close family members, spouses of people who have green cards. I think that if we were able to simplify our immigration system and streamline the number of categories, that would benefit all the applicants, because we'd be able to speed the processing that much more, so people don't have the ridiculously long waits that they're now experiencing to have their green card applications processed. And we would be able to provide better screening, so that we aren't admitting people who are ineligible or dangerous, and bring in a higher proportion of immigrants who are well educated and skilled and prepared for our modern economy. To curb illegal immigration, I agree that it's absolutely a silly idea to think that we can forcibly remove 12 million people from the country. It doesn't make sense, and it's not something that I think most Americans would agree with. But what we can do is promote a culture of voluntary compliance with immigration laws, and that's how we approach a lot of other legal issues and criminal justice issues in the country. Obviously, we need better border patrol and fencing, but we also need to prevent employment of illegal aliens. And it simply shouldn't be a choice in this country of whether or not to follow the rules on hiring workers. I mean, right now, employers have a choice to either follow the law and make sure that they're hiring workers, or simply to excuse themselves from the law, and that's unacceptable. We have an easy-to-use system in place that employers can use, and a lot of states are starting to look at making that program mandatory for certain types of employers, and we're seeing that it's working. We need to crack down on identity theft and use of fraudulent documents. We need to prosecute and remove criminal aliens, whether they're drunk drivers, gang members, sex offenders, or drug traffickers. That should be the highest priority, and we should remove obstacles to those and have better systems for doing that, and crack down on smuggling and exploitation of workers as well. I think that the prospects for immigration reform at the federal level are no brighter now than they were 2 years ago. I don't see much chance of it happening, frankly, or being done by Congress. However, all the action now is really at the state level. I think probably every state in the nation has considered some kind of immigration law this year, and many of them have enacted them, and they're following the path of states like Arizona and Oklahoma and Georgia, and because they're finding that it really does help. And as a result of laws being passed at the state level, we're seeing more action in the courthouses around America as these laws are tested against the Constitution and against the authorities that states have to wade into this area. And it is very complicated, but there is a path forward, and I think we're going to see some progress this year on that front as well. But at this point, I hope I've provoked some questions among the audience members, and look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see, I come here this evening, the only one dressed in a short sleeve shirt. Spring will be next week, I guarantee you. First of all, I'd like to say is I'm not anti-immigrant. Basically, all our farming and working relationship is in agriculture, and that's my heart and soul. When I was 19 years old, I went to school 1 year after high school, and somebody talked me into part-time work, and I never left it, and I was the age of 19, and I'm 71 years old today. When I was 13 years old, on the family farm, my grandfather had a stroke, and he was a German immigrant, and he spoke German very fluently. And I had one choice, to learn it, because I was a harsh German gentleman. But he also learned English also, which is a lot of my concern on these immigrants coming into the United States. English would be a language that they should learn. Immigrants work in agriculture, Christmas tree farms, landscaping, dairy farms, vegetable farms, food processing plants, hotel industry, construction, fast food, just to name a few. If we do not have these workers, who will fill these positions? How many help-wanted ads do you see in these places of employment? And my main concern is 2% of the employment in the United States is agriculture, which is a very minor amount. So a lot of people really don't care, but the price of food, as you are hearing on the news media, is having a reflection. Is it the 2% agriculture people that are creating? Is it fuel creating? It's majority of things. First thing you hear is milk and eggs are on the increase, but that's the only two you hear. And you don't hear how much a price of a bottle of water is comparison to what, and so forth. The one that goes in and buys a bottle of beverage, how much they pay for that. You watch the grocery stores to see how much comes out in a grocery cart, how much is agriculture. That concerns me. Due to decreasing the number of dairy farms, there are no longer farm-raised young people to fill the positions that are available on dairy farms. 25 to 30 years ago, that is where the farm labor force came from. The dairy farm today, which in our area is maybe 90% of our business, it's getting more business, more technical, and there's no place other than the university system to create this education. I'm proud to say here tonight, this university extension here, University of Wisconsin, River Falls, Technical Institute here in Wausau is 100% behind and backing a school that might be formed here where it's a hands-on school. And if you hear anything on a DSA, which is Dairy State Academy, they're forming for a accredited school in Marathon County for training agriculture. We cannot in the agriculture business find people. Are these Latinos good workers? Yes, they are. Immigration workers are not taking away jobs from U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens do not want to do these jobs. The U.S., when we get an employment person coming in, the first thing they want to do is know how much you pay. They don't even care what they got to do. You get an immigration person in there, they want to know what they have to do and what they want to pay. And most people, yes, some abuse it, which is not good, but most people, if they do a good job, they're rewarded, even if they're immigrant. Anyhow, that's how we treat them. Immigration workers pay taxes. They support the economy by spending money in the community, purchasing groceries, clothing, vehicles, insurance, utilizing gas stations and banks. Immigrants pay Social Security taxes, federal and state income tax, and in some cases own homes, paying real estate, and give rental units a lot of support by renting homes. Immigrant workers are dependable, reliable, and dedicated to their job. In most cases, they have risked their lives to get to the United States, as you have heard here before from these two young ladies here, to find a better way of life. They are very dedicated to their families, and if they have families where they came from, they send money home to them. They can make more here in 2 weeks than they can make in 1 year in Mexico, and that's on the low rate. And if they're supplied, paid what they are worth, a lot of them, they receive more than that. Immigrants contribute to our cultural diversity, which enriches our society. Immigrants contribute to our strong national tradition, and most Americans are descended from immigrants. A few may get into trouble, but so do legal Americans, although immigrants usually have a lot more to lose being deported. We have some immigrants employed. I think the thing we as an employer have a problem with is finding out what's legal and what's legal in the paperwork that they bring to us. Us as an employer, and I'm speaking for ourselves, look at every angle we can to make sure it's as legal as possible. But it's just like in the latest newspaper, you see a fake $20 bill. A lot of this comes through fake. We understand that, but we are not perfection to know what causes it. If we don't look as agriculture to survive, mind you, everyone sitting in this room tonight, right now, we need them to have the employment force. And remember what food is very cheap in America, and just remember that it will not stay there forever. Thank you.
Some of my comments are going to be the same as Dale's, and I bring a little bit different perspective. As Eric approached me and asked about immigration, I thought, well, what do I know about immigration? But we are in agriculture, and we do have some of our customers involved with immigration labor. And I guess, in starting out, I think we do need some reform in our immigration laws. But I'll be the first one also to say that I'm not an expert, but I do have an opinion. As I was talking with Eric, as I do have some current concerns as we move forward in the future about our labor force. And I think I'm not going to speak out of turn that in the future, the U.S. labor force is going to face a shortage. The demand and the recruitment for labor is going to be serious for U.S. companies in the future. Within the next 10 years, we're going to have approximately 72 million workers retiring. And we only have about 40 or 50 million workers to replace those baby boomers that will be retiring. This leaves about 32 to 22 million jobs available. Employers tomorrow will need to become more efficient and find alternatives forms of labor. These alternative forms will be retired people that choose to continue to work, handicapped people that are able to work and are able to be trained, immigrants, and some companies will choose to relocate their businesses to other countries, and some companies will impose new technologies that create more efficiencies. I think part of understanding the future labor we need to look at, a little bit of of what we're faced with. And I think the increase in our unskilled U.S. labor force, as Jessica mentioned, that even the U.S. Labor that is entering is a little bit less skilled, not as educated, and it may not be employable. There's also the generation that will be entering the labor force is quite different. And as employers, we need to understand that generation. They're quite technology savvy, and as businesses grow, they need to understand how they use technology and how they can become an asset of the company. The Generation Xers also have their own timetable. They want to, as Dale had mentioned, they want to get from graduation to the head of the company in a short period of time. And they want to be evaluated on their merits. And they also want to join large organizations. They're not ones to be in smaller organizations. I can't really speak about the legal or illegal part of immigration. I guess as Jessica mentioned, I didn't know there was a choice in regards to following the law. And as Dale had mentioned, there are laws that require proof of citizenship, and I just thought everybody followed that. But I can understand some of the problem as our area and being more rural, that we may not understand the laws, or may not, and ignorance of the law is no excuse, but I think there needs to be a little bit better education for the farm community, agricultural community that are starting to use immigration, and understand that they need to have certain paperwork in place. I also understand, as I prepared a little bit tonight, is that our immigration tends to be a problem where there is economic depressed countries. And the reason they're coming to our country is because it's a land of opportunity and a land to make money. And we have less of a problem with Canada with illegal immigrants. And the reason that people are coming here is that there is an opportunity to make money and to, whether it be send it back home or live in this country for all its riches. So I think that in developing our policies, we need to understand that the equalizing of these economies where in future years, I believe that these immigration issues will subside and will go away. But as we always have a need for labor, there'll always be immigrants. Some of the challenges, I think, as we face immigration are the common communication, whether it be from the employer to the employee, and understanding the languages. Many of my employees are just English speaking. They're not bilingual, and that may be something that we need to change as an employer as we move into the future. Also, retailers to a customer. When we do have immigrant customers that come in and want to buy things, many times it is difficult to communicate, but we seem to be able to get by. We also understand that in some of the challenges that some immigrants do wish ill will upon Americans. And I think that, as Dale mentioned, even Americans wish ill upon Americans. I think we also need to take a look at a system of subsidizing local and state governments in transitioning immigrants and businesses to build that labor pool. And I think the biggest challenge is overcoming the change of the old American way, and we built America by immigration, and I think that we'll continue to build America and make America great by immigration. Thank you.
Vamos a comenzar a hablar de los impuestos.
We're going to start to talk about taxes.
Muchos norteamericanos creen que los indocumentados no pagan impuestos y representan una enorme carga para el gobierno.
Many North Americans believe that the undocumented do not pay taxes and represent an enormous burden for the government.
Pero esto es una gran mentira y esto se puede comprobar.
But this is a large lie, and it can be proven.
Todos, tanto indocumentados como documentados, pagamos impuestos.
All of us, the undocumented as well as the documented, we all pay taxes.
Las oficinas del IRS tienen una enorme cantidad de dinero que no fue reclamado por contribuyentes indocumentados.
The offices of the IRS have an enormous quantity of money that was not reclaimed by undocumented contributors.
Hasta hace un poco de tiempo, muchos indocumentados encontraron la forma de recuperar algo de dinero con la devolución de impuestos con el ITIN.
Until a short time ago, many undocumented found a way to recuperate some of the money from tax refunds using a tax identification number.
Ahora hablaremos del impacto que tienen los indocumentados en la economía.
Now we'll talk about the impact that the undocumented have on the economy.
Los inmigrantes ilegales representan un gran soporte en la economía de los Estados Unidos.
Illegal immigrants represent a great support for the economy of the United States.
Y esto también se puede comprobar, aparte de que pagan impuestos y servicio social sin recibir los beneficios.
And this too can be proven in addition to the fact that they pay taxes and Social Security without receiving the benefits.
Y aún recibiendo maltrato y sueldos raquíticos de algunos empleadores quienes los obligan a trabajar en difíciles condiciones.
And two, they receive bad treatment and miserable salaries from some employers who oblige them to work in very difficult conditions.
En donde la única finalidad es enriquecerse, obligándolos a hacer trabajos que la mayoría de los norteamericanos no hacen, ni pagándoles aún el doble.
Where their only end is to enrich themselves, doing work, doing jobs, performing jobs that the majority of North Americans will not do, even if they were paid double.
Todos ustedes deben saber que los campos de siembra y los ranchos de vacas, de mins, de caballos, de cerdos y de muchos más son los trabajadores indocumentados quienes laboran en ellos.
You all ought to know that the agricultural fields and the farms with cows, horses, pigs, and much more are the undocumented workers who work there.
Ahora hablaremos de qué clase de trabajos tienen los indocumentados.
And what kind of work do the undocumented have?
Representan un gran porcentaje de todos los trabajadores en una poca categoría laboral más detalladas.
They represent a large percentage of all the workers in a few labor categories in particular.
Representan, incluyendo el 37% de los trabajadores se relacionan con la agricultura y la ganadería.
They include 37% of the jobs that are related to agriculture and cattle, cows.
El 17% se dedican a la limpieza.
17% dedicate themselves to cleaning service.
El 21% se dedican a la construcción, incluyendo instalación de techos y paredes.
21% are in construction, including installation of walls and roofing.
Y el 25% restantes trabajan en alguna fábrica de manufactura o del tipo de procedimiento de alimentos. Todas estas cifras se refieren a marzo del 2006.
And the remaining 25% work in some kind of factory or manufacturing, in food processing. All of these statistics come from March 2006.
En cualquier parte del país, en los Estados Unidos, donde se encuentren latinos o hispanos, documentados o indocumentados,
In whatever part of the United States, you would find workers, either Latinos or Hispanics, either documented or undocumented.
siempre serán un gran apoyo y soporte para la economía de los Estados Unidos porque trabajan y trabajamos muy fuerte.
They will always be a great support for the economy of the United States because they work very hard. They are very hard workers.
Ahora vamos a hablar del impacto que tienen en la sociedad.
Now we'll talk about the impact that they have on the society.
Estados Unidos es un país multicultural, es un país formado por inmigrantes de todo el mundo.
The United States is a multicultural country. It's a country formed by immigrants from all over the world.
Y cuando llega un inmigrante a este hermoso país, comienza una metamorfosis o cambio para adaptarse a esta nueva sociedad.
And when an immigrant arrives to this beautiful country, a metamorphosis begins, or a change to adapt oneself to the new society.
Los 12 millones de inmigrantes indocumentados que están en este país
The 12 million immigrants, undocumented immigrants who are in this country,
no pueden adaptarse a la sociedad por la misma condición de ilegalidad en la que se encuentran.
cannot adapt to the society for the same condition of illegality in which they find themselves.
Vean ustedes a todos los que algún día fueron indocumentados y hoy están de manera legal. Ellos están adaptados.
And if you look at all those who one day were undocumented and today are in some way legal, they are adapted. They have adapted.
Ellos aprenden a hablar inglés, celebran el Día de Acción de Gracias, las crismas, algunos cambian su religión, celebran el Día de la Independencia.
They learn and they speak English. They celebrate Thanksgiving Day, Christmas. Some change their religion and they celebrate Independence Day.
Pero mientras están en la condición de indocumentados, ¿cómo podemos pedirles que se adapten si su situación es de incertidumbre?
But while they are in the condition of being undocumented, how can we ask them to adapt if their situation is one of uncertainty?
Ellos no saben si hoy o mañana serán deportados y separados de sus familiares que ya nacieron aquí.
They don't know if today or tomorrow they will be deported and separated from their family members who were born here.
Ahora les hablaré algo de la lealtad.
Now I will tell you something about loyalty.
La mayor parte de los inmigrantes indocumentados, documentados y indocumentados de origen hispano, mostramos lealtad.
The large part of both documented and undocumented immigrants of Hispanic origin, we show loyalty.
Tanto a nuestras familias en nuestros países de origen, mandando dinero para que sigan sobreviviendo.
To our families in our countries of origin, sending them money so that they can survive.
Y aquí, en este hermoso país, que nos está brindando la oportunidad de trabajar y vivir mejor, nosotros sí consumimos lo que el país produce.
And here in this beautiful country that is providing us the opportunity to work and to live better, we are consuming what this country produces.
Y nosotros, que somos sus vecinos y mostramos lealtad comprobada y que hemos luchado juntos en el pasado en contra de muchas adversidades.
And we, who are your neighbors, we show proven loyalty that we have fought together in the past against much adversity.
Ustedes saben claramente que si alguien hace algún daño al pueblo norteamericano, nos lo está haciendo también a nosotros.
And you know clearly that if someone is endangering the North American people, they are also doing it to us.
Y cualquier problema que el pueblo norteamericano enfrente, lo enfrentamos juntos con él, hombro a hombro, porque aquí están ya nuestras raíces.
And whatever problem the North American people or the United States people confront, we face it together, shoulder to shoulder, because here are our roots.
Ahora voy a hablarles un poco de cómo es que para llegar aquí ponemos la vida en riesgo.
Now I'm going to talk about how in trying to come here, we put our lives at risk.
Ustedes no tienen ni una idea del sacrificio que tenemos que hacer para poder llegar a este país.
You have no idea of the sacrifice that we have to make in order to be able to come to this country.
¿De qué manera estará la situación en nuestros países de origen que arriesgamos hasta la vida con tal de vivir el sueño americano?
What do you suppose the situation in our countries of origin is that we would risk even our lives to live the American dream?
Dejamos a nuestras familias, a nuestros seres queridos, muchas de nuestras costumbres y tradiciones.
We leave our families, our loved ones, many of our customs and traditions.
El inmigrante indocumentado llega a este país a trabajar y trabajar muy duro para poder sobrevivir aquí y poder mandarle un poco de dinero a su familia para que sobreviva en su país de origen.
The undocumented immigrant arrives in this country to work and to work very hard in order to be able to survive here and to be able to send a little money back to his family so that they can survive in their countries of origin.
Muchos de ellos quedan muertos en el camino y sus familiares nunca saben más de ellos.
Many of them die on the way, and their family members never know anything more of them.
Otros son víctimas de violación, robo, abuso, maltrato. Algunos sufren mutilaciones en sus cuerpos.
Others are victims of rape, robbery, abuse, maltreatment. Some suffer mutilations on parts of their body.
¿Y qué pasa cuando ya está aquí? Se encuentra con grandes dificultades para poder trabajar.
And what happens when they're finally here? They find themselves with great difficulty.
Y esto es solo para trabajar, porque en este país existen muchas personas de muy buen corazón y que de una u otra forma ayudan a las personas sin ningún interés, solo por compasión, y esto lo agradecemos mucho.
And they only come here to work because in this country there are many people of very good heart and that in one form or another help the people without any self-interest, only for compassion. And for this, we thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you.
En lo personal, mi opinión es que muchos de los norteamericanos solo ven lo negativo de algunas personas que emigran a este país.
Personally, my opinion is that many of the North Americans only see the negative of some people who immigrate to this country.
Muchos no ven las dificultades que tenemos, que sufrimos para llegar aquí.
Many don't see the difficulties that we have to suffer in order to get here.
Nosotros, para poder estar aquí, pasamos hambre, frío, mucha tristeza por dejar nuestras familias, nuestras culturas, nuestras tradiciones.
And we, in order to be here, we experience hunger, cold, much sadness for leaving our families, our cultures, our traditions.
Tenemos que pasar por un desierto en el cual vemos cómo muchos de nuestros compañeros mueren, con tal de llegar a este país de oportunidades.
We have to pass through a desert in which we see how many of our companions die trying to arrive at this country of opportunity.
¿Ustedes creen que pasamos todos estos sufrimientos solo por divertirnos o para venir a vacacionar o conocer este país?
And do you believe that we go through all this suffering only to enjoy ourselves or to come to vacation or just to get to know this country?
Dice, no, claro que no. Nosotros venimos porque en nuestro país de origen es terrible la situación económica y de violación de violencia y corrupción, impunidad y corrupción.
No, of course not. We come because in our country of origin, the economic situation is terrible, and there's violence and impunity and corruption.
Y tenemos que tomar una gran determinación de salir de nuestros países o quedarnos o morir juntos y a nuestras familias, siendo víctimas de hambre o de la violencia.
And we have to make a great determination to leave our countries or to stay behind to die together with our families, being victims of hunger or of violence.
hablar otras palabras en medio de esto. Ok. Mi mayor ilusión fue llegar a este país por ayudar a mis familiares, primeramente a mis padres, mandándoles un poco de dinero para ayudarlos económicamente.
My greatest dream was to come to this country, to earn money, to send back to my family, especially to my parents, to help them economically.
Y tenemos contentos al realizar trabajos que los norteamericanos no quieren hacer. ¿Y por qué? Por un pago que todos ustedes lo saben.
And we are content to accept jobs that North Americans don't want to do, and for a salary that all of you know about.
¿Es muy buen pago o malo? Ustedes júzguenlo, ustedes hacen las leyes.
It is very good pay or very bad. You judge it. You make the laws.
Reconocemos que hay algunos emigrantes que cometen delitos y que no se adaptan a las leyes de este país. Ellos deberán ser juzgados conforme a la ley.
We recognize that there are some immigrants that commit crimes and that do not adapt to the laws of this country. They should be judged according to the law.
Ustedes deben de reconocer que la mayoría de los inmigrantes latinos que estamos en este hermoso país somos sus amigos y que solo queremos trabajar.
You should recognize that the majority of Latino immigrants who are in this beautiful country, we are your friends, and we only want to work.
Hacemos nuestro mayor esfuerzo para adaptarnos a esta sociedad. Respetamos las leyes, pagamos impuestos, incluimos nuestros esfuerzos por aprender inglés.
We are making our best effort to adapt to this society. We respect the laws, we pay taxes, and we even make an effort to learn English.
Gracias.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank each of our panelists. Unfortunately, you're not done yet, except for Bob. Should we release you at this point? Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. We'd like to ask our ambassadors or whoever has the roving microphone, if you wouldn't mind preparing that, and then we'll just take the time to turn over to you, actually, and see if you have any questions for our panelists. We have a microphone coming back from behind here.
This is a question for the policy analysts, the political scientists, and lawyers, and immigrant spokesperson. So I think you all might have a different perspective on it. What do you think about a national identity card with maybe some sort of biometric ID as a way to document the undocumented and control immigration as maybe a condition of employment?
Sure. I'm not in favor of that, actually. I don't think we need it. I think that we have 50 basic identity documents, and those would be the driver's licenses in each of 50 states that have, I mean, the reality is that those have become the most widely used identification document that's reliable in most cases, even though obviously there are others, passports and so on. So I would not be in favor of a national ID card. I don't see what value that would add. I think it would be extremely costly, and particularly if it is issued to people whose identities can't be determined, that creates an even more risky security situation. So what I am in favor of is increasing the standards for those states whose driver's licenses still lack certain basic security features or still are vulnerable in certain ways. And I think that the Real ID Act is a big step in the right direction. I think we've achieved, many of the states have taken the steps in that legislation on their own. And a few of them need to be moved along a little bit, frankly, because I think those states are actually asking the rest of us to sacrifice some security so that they can maintain their licenses and don't understand the implications of that. But we're moving in the right direction, and there have been huge improvements since 9/11. So.
I also agree that I don't think that we need a national identification card or a national identification system. I don't think that that is going to resolve any issues of immigration or any other issues. I think that it would be incredibly expensive. There are also a lot of civil liberties and privacy issues involved in that. This would mean creating huge new databases with everybody's information that would be susceptible to identity theft and other nefarious purposes. I think we know that in Rwanda, they used ID cards to separate the Hutus from the Tutsis, and I'm not saying we would go to that extreme, but there are certainly possibilities for bad things that could be done with these cards. I think that any card, the technology experts have proven any card can be counterfeit, and we would just have bad people with good cards. Again, I think that employers who would really want to hire undocumented immigrants are going to do so and just not ask to see their cards. I have to disagree with Jessica, however, about the Real ID legislation. I think that this was a horrible law that was passed. I think that it is going to be incredibly expensive. It is going to deny basic identification to many U.S. citizens and lawful residents of the United States. Again, it does absolutely nothing to resolve our immigration problems. It does nothing for security. I think a driver's license should be proof of one's identity and authorization to drive a car.
I have a question I have an opinion, but I want to know from the two ladies here, Jessica. I was wondering if you listened to their statements or whatnot. I wonder, do you feel that they were making excuses? I am not trying to be harsh, but I feel that in a way they were kind of making excuses for the Hispanic people or whatnot, the reason why they come to America. Of course, everybody wants the American dream, yet you have your own country. You can easily build your country to the American dream, the American way of life, just like China and all them other countries that's doing the same thing. You don't hear about everybody immigrating to North Korea or anything like that. Nobody really want to go and do that. I mean, they were saying that they had to travel through their deserts and stuff, and they saw their people that were killed or whatnot. As I recall, my ancestors were drugged over here, no questions asked. That was a choice that their people decided to make, to come over here. That to me is an excuse, and it's really no reason why I can feel sorry for that, to be honest with you. And I was wondering, do you guys kind of feel that, that's a real big excuse that they're making? They're not really telling you why we should accept them as, legal people, like legal Americans. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I completely understand, and I really respect your opinion, and I thank you for sharing that with me. I will say that I don't think anybody really wants to be illegal or undocumented in this country. I think that that's a myth, that people could come here legally, but they choose not to, that they want to be undocumented. And that is simply not true. I do think that there are global factors that lead to migration. I think that there are factors in the sending countries that lead to migration, and there are pull factors here in the United States that lead to migration. And I do think that as a sovereign country, there's a lot we can do, but in some ways we're limited in what we can do in terms of controlling a global force of migration. But I do think, again, that people would choose to come legally. And I think that if we had a system that worked, they could do that. Now, you know, a lot of people don't really understand how the current system works. They think that anybody can get in line, sign a paper, and get a visa, you know, and it's simply not true. The avenues for coming here legally are very limited to certain close family members of citizens and green card holders, to certain workers with specialized skills. You know, we talk about the need for unskilled or low-skilled labor in this country. Do you know there are only 5,000 visas every year? If you say, why don't they just get in line? Well, because there ain't a line. There are only a very, very limited number of visas for people to come here and to come here legally. Yet all of those global forces continue to happen. So if it's not coming legally, it's coming extra legally. And I do, like I said at the beginning, I think that that's a problem. I'm not saying we can open our borders and take every single person that's ever wanted to come to the United States. That's crazy. But I do think that we need to rethink our system. We need to take another close look at those numbers, and we need to ensure that those people who want to come here, who we think would be good for our country, have a legal way of coming to this country. And then I think once we have a good system of laws in place, then, you know, our Border Patrol and our other immigration enforcement people could do the job going after that small number of criminals and terrorists and people who are really threats to us, rather than going after busboys and house cleaners. I think that the system would really improve our security if we knew who was in this country, if everybody were properly vetted and received a visa after going through a background check, if everybody had a good piece of identification rather than fake documents. You know, I really think that fixing the system would go a long way towards addressing a lot of the concerns that have been raised today.
Hi. With all due respect to everyone who comes here, however they came, I don't actually believe that the motivations of immigrants are necessarily the most important factor to consider in formulating immigration policy. And I think that clarifying that question of what is the goal of our immigration policy takes us a long way in answering your question. Our immigration policy, is it designed to help people in the world who live in poor countries? Or is it to help America and to do something for American citizens who may have wished to marry someone from another country, or for an employer who would like to bring over a very talented individual to work for an American company? And once we clarify what the purpose is of immigration policy and how many people we're interested in having, and then ensure that those we want to admit, we admit with relatively little hassle and falderall. Those who we don't want to admit get refused, and those who are here illegally are removed. I think, you know, when you start thinking about it in those terms, it becomes a lot more clear that despite people's very human and noble intentions, that's, you know, and who want to come here for perhaps all the right reasons, that's not why we have immigration policy. And it's particularly when the policies that we have are making it harder for certain groups of people who are already here to better themselves and to better support their families. So, I mean, we have to remember our immigration policy should serve our national interests, because we simply can't help everybody in the world.
Yo pienso que primero se tiene que hacer un acuerdo entre el gobierno de México y el gobierno de los Estados Unidos para sellar la frontera.
First, we need to make an agreement between the government of the United States and the government of Mexico to close the border.
Después se tendría que hacer un estudio sobre los 12 millones de ilegales que están en este país.
And then we would have to make a study of the 12 million illegals who are in this country.
Y hacer un análisis muy detallado porque no los 12 millones quieren quedarse a vivir en este país.
And we would have to make a very detailed analysis because not all 12 million want to stay in this country.
Hay aproximadamente 8 millones de hispanos que quieren quedarse en el país, pero 4 millones quieren regresar a su país.
There are approximately 8 million Hispanics who want to stay in this country, but there are 4 million who want to go back to their country.
Creo yo que después de ese análisis concientudo del gobierno, puede formar programas para atraer trabajadores de otros lugares con visa de trabajo, permiso de trabajo para estar periodos de 8 meses o 10 meses en el país.
So after making this very conscientious study and effort, the government then should have a program of workers, guest workers or workers with visa or permission to come here for 8 months or 10 months.
Las 5,000 visas de las que hablan ellas son insuficientes para la demanda de trabajadores en este país.
The 5,000 visas that they have referred to are insufficient for all of the workers that are needed and demanded in this country.
I just wanted to respond to some of the statements that came up in response to the last question that Jessica made and during her remarks. And that just is this issue of immigrants coming and hurting Americans who want to succeed in their life. I was just at a hearing that was held by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights in Washington, and the hearing topic was the impact of undocumented immigration on African Americans and their employment. And there were 2 panels of experts, and overwhelmingly the majority of the panelists said that the research shows that undocumented immigration has a very small impact on the employment of African Americans. And the majority of any negative impact that exists, which is small, is on other undocumented immigrants, other recently arrived immigrants. They also said overwhelmingly that the answer to Black unemployment does not lie within immigration policy. And they looked at things like the dropout rate, like high levels of incarceration, like high levels of unwed mothers. And they said that we need to shape public policies that address those issues because that's what's going to help young Black men and women get jobs in the United States. And stopping immigration isn't going to do that. And I just am continually surprised when I hear all of this advocacy for jobs for high school dropouts. And I just really wish that a bit of that were put into supporting programs so that these kids don't drop out of school in the first place. Why are we advocating for high school dropouts not to be in competition with undocumented immigrants? Let's keep them in school so that they can compete for better jobs.
I've got a couple comments, if you don't mind.
I figured.
That sounds great. the person I think of often when engaging in these debates is my next door neighbor growing up, who was a kid named Billy, who was a couple years older than me, and he was mentally retarded, and went to at that time a separate school for kids who were mentally retarded, and when he graduated, he went to work. He got a job as a custodian at a nursing home nearby. And that job was his lifeline to a normal existence. He loved his job. It's probably not a job that Michelle or I would aspire to, but it was the most important thing in the world to him. And he used to come over, and I would spend a lot of time talking, and he would tell me about his day at work, and his boss, how hard he was on him, and how hard he worked, and he had all kinds of funny stories, but it really was the most important thing to him, and gave him dignity as a human being and as an adult. And those are also the kinds of people who are seeing their opportunities diminished directly as a result of mass immigration. I really wonder how many nursing homes today would take the trouble to hire someone like my friend Billy. Today, I think he would be shoved off to adult daycare instead of being given the opportunity. And maybe he required a little more supervision than perhaps somebody else would. But it's an important thing to consider in this debate that we need to create space in our job market for people like that as well. And I see this where I live in the suburbs of Boston, where young people in the community are having trouble finding summer jobs. And the programs to create jobs for them are woefully underfunded by the city government. And you have a lot of kids on the street all summer long who would be better off going to work every day. Meanwhile, about an hour away on Cape Cod, all these employers are complaining that they're not going to open this year unless we get our foreign workers, that we're going to have to shut down Cape Cod this year if we can't get ice cream scoopers from abroad and lifeguards from abroad and chambermaids from abroad. And we've had our foreign workers for all these years. And the irony of that strikes me every year when I think about those kids in the city who would love to have the chance to spend a summer on Cape Cod working and learning what it's like to earn a living and gaining experience that will help them do better later in life. I mean, none of us aspire to these jobs for our whole life, but it's important to preserve those entry-level jobs for all of us to gain a foothold in the workforce and learn the value of work. And a lot of people have used the expression tonight, jobs Americans won't do. I would like somebody to tell me, what is a job Americans won't do anymore? Because I don't think it exists. I don't think Americans find themselves above any particular kind of work. There is one, while it is true that there are only 5,000 visas available for green cards for unskilled workers, the truth is that as I described, I think, through explaining how our immigration system works, our whole immigration program, absent about 140,000 visas for people who do have skills, is an unskilled immigration program. That because most of the people who are entering in the family categories lack skills. So again, it's hard to see where this where the need is to accommodate more skilled workers in our green card program. When we're admitting close to 1 million people who fall in that category legally every year, I just don't see the need to create more openings in that area.
Do you have another question?
Did you want?
I'd like to make just one comment on that. I got for and a bit against what you just spoke on. In our employment, on one of our businesses, we have 22 employees in there. There's 2 boys that were dropouts in high school. One was 15, one is 16 when he came with us. They had to go the extra year into high school to graduate, and we made them do the work program. They're with us yet today. One is 23 and one is 25. Along with the opposite of that, I have a very good friend that's got a small strawberry farm. And last year, the gentleman's getting along in years, but the last year he was short of help at his strawberry farm for picking berries. And when the strawberries are ripe, they have to be picked. So he went around to the school and to the city to see if he could find her, and he had 3 young gals that says, yep, come pick me up tomorrow morning, I will be there. He says, I'll help you through the strawberry season. All 3 of them, one was ill, one didn't answer the door, and the other one never showed up the next morning, and he drove right up to the door to get him. So he depended on these 3. These Latinos, in all honesty, you depend on them, they will be there. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's finally my turn. I missed the beginning. I got here a little bit late, and so I'm not sure what I missed, but I'm guessing it was quite a bit, at least 30 minutes. I grew up in the border in Laredo, Texas. You cross the bridge and you're in Mexico. My mother was from Mexico, from an old military family from the early 1900s. Very proud of her heritage. My brother and I were born in Laredo, Texas, which is the U.S. side. My father has been in the United States since 1750. I am 100% of, I don't know what the politically correct term is, Latino, Hispanic. We consider ourselves Mexican American. I consider myself Mexican, born in the United States. All these immigration issues that you bring out are very interesting, because almost the entire amount of my life has been spent in a border town watching all these things play out. And I have family members who, my mother, who was born in Mexico and became a U.S. citizen, brought relatives over through the legal channels, petitioned for them, brought them over. And they in turn betrayed that trust and brought over other relatives illegally. My mother, when I was 7 or 8, I remember her for many, many years having her green card and being very protective of it, studying for the citizenship test, failing it because she couldn't master the English language, and then studying for it again until she finally took it. Once she did that, she became a patriot. She refused to have anything else to do with the government of Mexico. And we have relatives in Mexico that say, come here, come visit us, and she is totally against that. I hear the stories, I've heard them all my life, I've heard them in different states, and I can tell you that being from Texas, there is very little tolerance for breaking the law and coming to this country legally. And I have to say, as someone who identifies 100% as a Hispanic, as a Latina woman, with all the cultural rights that go with that, with the traditions and everything else, that I am against folks coming into this country illegally for whatever reason. And I know that it'll offend people here, and I'm sorry that it does that, but I have seen this. I have seen the Border Patrol and how diligent they are in making sure that we are safe. I'm not saying that some of the folks here will make us unsafe. I'm saying that I don't agree with the things that come in with people entering the country illegally. The identity theft. I used to live in a little small town east of here where there's probably 60 families that work at a mill there.
Excuse me, And almost, this is a really interesting story, but do you have any questions for the panelists?
Yes, I want
Okay,
to.
thank you.
Okay, well, I see what's going on here, but my question for the panelists is, what, if anything, do you see the government doing to control the immigration that is taking place illegally and to provide the visas for people that do want to follow the legal process here?
Thanks. I'll start. I think that that is a great question. I would say definitely not the things that we've been doing for the last 20 years. I mean, we've quintupled the Border Patrol, the budget along the border for building a wall, for all this fancy technology, the stadium lighting, all kinds of stuff. It's not working. The more billions and billions of dollars we've spent over the last 20 years, the more undocumented immigration has increased. And we have to remember that about 60% of our undocumented immigration is people crossing the border, and it does include the Canadian border, and the other 40% are visa overstays. So none of those billions of dollars are going towards enforcing 40% of undocumented immigration. What I'm saying is that is obviously not working. Congress continues to throw money at the issue to say another 100 miles of fencing, and it is not working, and it's time for a new, real, fundamental solution to this problem. So yes, I think we need to deal with the 12 million that are here. I think we need to create a system whereby they can come forward, identify themselves, pay all of their taxes, go through a background check, and those people who we think are not criminals and should be able to stay here should be able to get their legal status. I mean, there are 12 million people. They're not going home. We can't deport them all. We need to do something because continuing to live in an undocumented status is not good for anybody. And yes, we need to revisit our numbers. We need to look at what are the needs of our economy, what are the needs of our family, what is the proper balance there between family immigration and economic and humanitarian, refugee and asylee issues. And then let's all get together and the experts in this issue can debate it and talk about it, and then let's change those numbers so that they make more sense for us in the 21st century. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that. Congress is too scared to do it, and they just keep throwing more money at enforcement along the border. And it's not working, and people are fed up. And I think we all need to write to our members of Congress and tell them to get off their butts and do something about this.
I don't think we necessarily need any new laws. I would really like to see us enforce the laws that we have, which, contrary to what Michelle said, I don't agree that we've been trying it for 20 years. I think we've been trying it for about 18 months, and it is starting to work. According to the census figures, illegal immigration is growing at a slower rate than it was before, but we are starting to see an impact. I don't think we need a wall at the border, but I have seen the triple fence in San Diego, and it works really, really well. They have achieved control of the border in certain areas, and we need to. It does make operational sense in certain parts along the border to have that kind of a barrier in place to preserve the property of American citizens who live there, to preserve their safety, and to prevent illegal crossings at will. If you know the San Diego border at all, you know that just a few years ago, there was no barrier, and people used to gather on the Mexican side until sun went down, and then just stream across, thousands at a time, and a few hapless Border Patrol agents would be there just trying to pick off whoever they could. Now there's a fence there, and you need fewer agents to work that area, and fewer people do cross, and they're starting to spread that out across the border. But it works. The missing link, I think, in our approach has been enforcement in the interior for exactly one of the reasons that Michelle mentioned, and that is we have so many people who overstay visas. And also, what we've had is a situation where once you got past the Border Patrol at the border, you were home free because you could get a job, you could get a driver's license, you could get a mortgage, you could get all kinds of access to social services. And but the key is really the job magnet, and until more employers start taking advantage of the free and easy to use systems that we have in place that allow them to verify the status of their workers, they're going to continue to be duped by false documents, and we're going to continue to have this identity theft problem. And it's just, I think, just takes creating a new labor standard that you need to hire legal workers and you need to verify status. It's easy to do. We shouldn't be trying to turn employers into quasi-immigration agents, but let them have access to the immigration agency, which can tell them within most cases in 3 to 5 seconds if somebody they've just hired is eligible to work here. So we have the systems in place. We just need to use them.
Con respecto a de que hay ilegales que son malos y delincuentes, ya hablamos que sí, reconocemos que los hay, pero habemos muchos que venimos a aportar cosas buenas. Con relación.
Yes, yes, there are delinquents and criminals, but there are many who are good.
Con relación a la frontera, aún así que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos ponga una barda en toda la frontera completamente, habrá ilegales que entrarán.
Even if the United States puts a barrier across the entire border, there will still be illegals who will come.
Para que no entren personas ilegales a este país, tiene que haber una colaboración entre el gobierno de México y el gobierno de Estados Unidos para que entre los dos cuiden la frontera.
In order for there not to be people coming illegally into the United States, there has to be an agreement between the United States government and Mexico so that they both take care of the border.
En cuanto a los trabajos que los norteamericanos no quieren hacer, yo les digo a las personas que son de Wisconsin que de cada 3 litros de leche que se consumen en Wisconsin, 4 litros los ordeñan los hispanos.
He said at the end there, for those of us who live in Wisconsin, and as for jobs that the Americans don't want to do, for every 3 liters of milk that's produced in Wisconsin, 4 liters are milked by Mexicans.
En cuanto a los productos del campo, de cada 3 tomates que se ponen en la mesa de cualquier estadounidense, 2 de esos tomates son cosechados por los mexicanos, por los indocumentados.
And for every 3 tomatoes that are on the market or put on the table in the United States, 2 have been picked by illegal Mexicans.
No creemos nosotros que los norteamericanos no puedan hacerlo. Sí lo pueden hacer, solo que es un trabajo más pesado que ellos no quieren hacer.
It's not that we don't believe that Americans can't do it, it's that they don't want to do it.
En los ranchos donde se ordeñan las vacas, verán a los trabajadores hispanos ocupando trabajos muy diferentes a los que están ocupando los norteamericanos.
So on the dairy farms, you see Mexican workers doing very different, or the American workers doing very different work from the kind of work that Mexicans are doing.
Y aún así, como mencionó Elvia, nos sentimos orgullosos de trabajar porque nos gusta trabajar y venimos a este país a trabajar.
And even so, as she said, we are proud to be here, and we're glad to be doing the work that we're doing.
I just wanted to respond to another comment about this employment verification system. You might be hearing about this because there's legislation in Congress that would make it mandatory for everybody. This isn't an immigration enforcement tool. This is a national system they're talking about that means that every single one of us, U.S. citizens included, would have to ask the government for permission to work. And they would send back either yes or no. Currently, it's a tiny pilot project. Less than 1% of all employers are using it. There have been a lot of problems with it. There are millions of errors in this database, and any one of us could be told erroneously that we are not authorized to work in this country. So there are going to be problems for us in this system, yet undocumented workers who have good fake documents whose records are in the system are not going to show up as a problem. It's not a system that we should put all our faith into. It's not a magic bullet. It's not the way to reform our immigration system.
Well, I wish we had more time, but we promised we'd end on time. And for that reason, I'd like to give a big round of applause to our panelists and thank them for their thoughtful responses.